The city so strong, it didn't even need walls throughout history. Cities have been defined by their walls. Rome had its walls. Constantinople had its walls. Even Paris had walls that stretched for miles. But what if I told you there was a city so powerful, so strategically positioned, and so economically dominant that it never needed walls at all? A city that stood naked against its enemies, yet remained unconquered for centuries. This is the story of Venice, the impossible city. The city that shouldn't exist, yet became one of the most powerful empires in medieval Europe. Imagine, if you will, the year 1200. Europe is a patchwork of warring kingdoms, each city desperately building higher walls, deeper moats, stronger fortifications. Yet in the middle of the Adriatic Sea, on a collection of muddy islands that most would consider uninhabitable, stands a city with no walls at all. No massive stone barriers, no towering battlements, no iron gates, just water. Endless, surrounding water. The founders of Venice weren't trying to build an empire. They were refugees, fleeing the barbarian invasions that swept across Italy in the 5th and 6th centuries. When Attila the Hun came thundering across the plains, when the Lombards descended from the north, the people of the mainland didn't fight. They ran. They ran to the one place no army could follow, the marshlands of the Venetian lagoon. These weren't prime real estate. These were mosquito-infested swamps, dotted with small islands that flooded at high tide. The refugees arrived with nothing but their lives and their determination. They had no choice but to make this impossible place work. And in that desperation, they discovered something extraordinary. They had found nature's perfect fortress. You see, while other cities built walls to keep enemies out, Venice had something far more effective, the lagoon itself. It was a maze of shallow waters, shifting sandbanks, and hidden channels. Only the Venetians knew the safe passages. Only they understood the tides, the currents, the secret routes that could carry a ship safely to the city's heart. Any foreign fleet approaching Venice faced an impossible challenge. Come at high tide, and your ships would run aground on sandbars that appeared from nowhere. Come at low tide, and you'd find yourself trapped in channels too shallow for your vessels. The lagoon wasn't just Venice's highway. It was the most sophisticated defense system ever created by nature. But the Venetians didn't stop there. They turned their geographical advantage into economic dominance. While other European cities were landlocked, fighting over trade routes and taxing merchants who passed through their territories, Venice controlled something far more valuable: the sea itself. The city became the bridge between East and West. Silk from China, spices from India, gold from Byzantium, everything flowed through Venice. The Venetian merchants, known as the most skilled traders in the world, built a commercial empire that stretched from London to Constantinople, from Alexandria to Crimea. Their ships, the famous Venetian galleys, were marvels of engineering. Fast, maneuverable, and perfectly designed for both trade and warfare, they could outrun any enemy fleet and outmaneuver any rival. The Venetian arsenal, the greatest shipbuilding facility in the world, could construct a complete galley in a single day, a feat that seemed impossible to foreign observers. But here's what made Venice truly unstoppable: they understood that economic power was far more effective than military might. Why conquer territories when you could buy them? Why maintain expensive armies when you could hire mercenaries? Why build walls when you could build wealth? The Venetian government, the most serene republic, was unlike anything else in medieval Europe. It wasn't ruled by a king who inherited power, or by nobles who gained it through conquest. It was ruled by merchants, practical, calculating men who understood that war was just another business transaction. When enemies threatened Venice, the city didn't send armies to meet them in open battle. Instead, they did something far more devastating. They cut off their trade routes. Venice controlled the Mediterranean's most important shipping lanes. Cross Venice, and suddenly your merchants couldn't get Eastern goods. Your economy strangled. Your people suffered. It was economic warfare at its most sophisticated level. Consider the Fourth Crusade in 1204. The Crusaders came to Venice asking for ships to carry them to the Holy Land. The Venetians, led by the brilliant Doge Enrico Dandolo, agreed to help for a price. When the Crusaders couldn't pay, Dandolo convinced them to attack Constantinople instead, Venice's greatest trade rival. The result? Constantinople was sacked, its wealth flowed to Venice, and the Byzantine Empire never recovered. Venice had used someone else's army to eliminate their biggest competitor, and they never fired a single shot themselves. This was Venice's genius. They turned every threat into an opportunity, every enemy into a tool, every crisis into profit. For over 1,000 years, this strategy worked perfectly. The Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople, but couldn't touch Venice. The Holy Roman Empire controlled much of Italy, but left Venice alone. Napoleon's armies swept across Europe, but Venice remained independent. The city that had no walls proved stronger than any fortress. But Venice's strength came with a price. By refusing to adapt to changing times, by clinging too tightly to their maritime empire when the world was discovering new trade routes, they eventually found themselves bypassed by history. The Portuguese found the sea route to India. The Spanish conquered the Americas. The center of world trade shifted from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. Venice's empire faded not because it was conquered, but because it became irrelevant. Yet even today, centuries after its decline, Venice stands as proof of an extraordinary truth: that the strongest fortifications aren't always made of stone and steel. Sometimes they're made of water and wisdom, of geography and ingenuity, of economic power and political cunning. The city that didn't need walls became one of history's greatest empires, not through the strength of its defenses, but through the power of its ideas. Venice reminds us that true strength doesn't come from building barriers to keep the world out. It comes from building bridges to bring the world in. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all from the city so strong it didn't even need walls.